Hi, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Cara Jade Myers, whose breakout performance in Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon has had audiences talking ever since it premiered in October and even since the Cannes Film Festival, which you did attend.
Yes. Yes, which I'm so excited I actually got to attend one.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that in a second, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming here and for sitting down and talking to me about Killers of the Flower Moon. I love this movie. It's my top one of my top films of the year, and you were absolutely amazing in it.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, no, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm just honestly so excited that it's finally out and people can finally see it and we can finally talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. Now that the pesky strike is over, but I'm glad that everybody got what they needed from the strike, and that fair wages are have been won. So that's
Exactly. Yeah.
fighting the good fight
It's
for
a
sure.
necessary evil.
Yes. So I'd like to start with a bit of a generic question. How did you come to Killers of the Flower Moon? What was that process like?
Well, I first heard about it from one of my friends, Carolina. She was like, "Oh, have you heard Martin Scorsese's doing this book, Killers of the Flower Moon? Have you heard about it?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Read it. It'll piss you off." So I read it, pissed me off, you know, and because it's so incredibly tragic, and it's just to me, it's crazy that this kind of thing isn't taught in schools. Like it's very much like I like my tribes are Oklahoman, they're Kiowa and Wichita, which, isn't far from Osage County, and never heard of it until the book, And so it's crazy, but I did the traditional route of auditioning for it. I did multiple, I want to say I probably did like 8 auditions for it. But we started auditioning in November of 2019, and at the time, Mr. Scorsese was doing the Irishman, his that whole campaign during award season. So they're like, after March, we'll let you know. So then March 2020 rolls around and we didn't know. And COVID. Yeah. So we started auditioning again in November of 2020. And I found out soon after that in December that I booked it. And it was amazing because I was on a Zoom call with my manager at the time. And he's like, "Oh, I just wanted to say," and then he pushed a little button, and Renee Hayes and Elise came on from the casting. And they're like, "Congratulations." And I just started sobbing. Like, I
Yeah.
honestly didn't hear anything after that. I was just like, "Ah,"
I can't even imagine. So you talked about the fact that the murders that are at the focus of the book and the film Killers of the Flower Moon that happen in the Osage Territory, those are not well taught. Those are not taught at all. Similar to the Tulsa. I don't know why it is about massacres in Oklahoma. They're not taught anywhere, but Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is also featured in the film, is also not taught. Does that, when you as an indigenous actor, does that weigh on you when you come to a project like this? Do you know do you feel that sort of, this is my moment to be able to talk about this and to push this forward and to speak the truth about what happened?
Totally, because I mean, history for far too long, like you said, they just have a way of burying these kind of things, which is extremely frustrating because it is a part of our past. And if we don't teach it as a part of the past and learn from it, we're gonna repeat it. And so it's definitely something that's super important. And then when I booked the role, I think my main concern was for the Osage people. Like,
Mhm.
I know that these are their relatives that we're portraying, and not much was really written about them just in history, period. Like, the only reason we know this story is because of William Hill and Ernest Burkhart. Like, that was their story was documented, and subsequently Anna and Molly, the Kyle family, their story was documented because of that. But it is very frustrating, and it's also sad that they don't teach us because a lot of people, like, there's people that like, "Oh, we didn't know natives still existed."
Mhm.
Like, history stops at the Trail of Tears, they move us to Oklahoma, and then they don't talk about us again. And so, like, there are people who have asked, like, "Oh, do you still live in teepees? Do you have electricity? Like, do you still ride horses?" Like, and all this stuff to where, and like, I'm not mad at them because you don't know what you don't know. but it does become one of those things where we are constantly having to educate people on Native Americans and our cultures and our practices. And even on sets, like a lot of times we portray a tribe that isn't our own. And of course, our customs are different, our traditions are different. So we become the cultural assistant, a cultural consultant for a tribe that we don't know much about. And then, so definitely I think it's frustrating when history has not been told correctly, and then it does give more of a responsibility to us as actors, because this is the first time that one of our stories have been told on this level and like this caliber. And we have amazing people like Marty and Leo and De Niro and Apple wanting to tell this story. So for me, I think the pressure wasn't necessarily like, oh, I have to do good because it's Scorsese. It's like I have to do good, and I have to show how full of life and love Anna is, because these are what everyone's going to see. So I think that was kind of my goal, was to very much show this force of a woman who's so full of life and happiness and love for her family that it causes her to, when she loses her family, that it causes her to start drinking and to numb that pain through alcoholism. And so that was another important aspect to me, was alcoholism, was portraying it not as a stereotypical like drunk native, as they say, but as someone who is literally has so much pain from losing her sister Minnie that she has to hide it. And so that was another important thing for me to portray.
That's, I mean, for you as a young actor, I mean, it just, it, to have that, the weight of that on you, all of those things you talk about, from the, to so accurately portray Anna's pain, and bearing that pain and alcoholism, to the weight of the community on you. Just I can't imagine going into a project like that. First major film, first film with Martin Scorsese, one of the greatest directors, and then to have that on you as well. It just, I'm amazed that you were able to get out of bed every day.
I mean, I was excited to get out of bed because, I mean, as big as Martin Scorsese and Leo and De Niro are, once you talk to them and you meet them, they're so incredibly collaborative and welcoming and just sweet and funny that like you're able to kind of put that aside, and maybe it's just me and my brain works weird or something like that, but I was able to kind of like compartmentalize that, where I'm literally sitting 2 feet from them like, oh my goodness, they're talking about the scene I'm about to do right in front of me. And then they're like, okay, Carrie, you got to act. I'm like, okay. So it's awesome, and, like, I think before you meet them and talk to them, you definitely have, like, this freak out moment, like, "Oh my god, it's Martin Scorsese," "It's Leonardo DiCaprio and De Niro, they're so legendary." But then once you actually talk to them, you're like, "Okay, like, they're people," you know?
Yeah. Well,
And they're
my
super
favorite film of
collaborative and
all time, right there, Age of Innocence. I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of dark back there.
yeah.
My
Oh,
favorite
wow.
film. I love it.
Oh my goodness.
Um, you're also on set with some of your heroes. And I know Tantu Cardinal is someone that you have spoken about as being a role model for you as an Indigenous actor.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what it's like. What was that experience, that bonding moment between you and her and Lily Gladstone and the other Indigenous actors who are on set?
Yeah, it was amazing because we were filming during COVID. So a lot of the protocols was to keep us apart.
Mhm.
But it's funny because Lily was on set most of the time. So it was mainly me, Jill, Janae, and Tantu. And they would always be like, girls, you have to separate, you have to separate. And we never would. We'd constantly be showing up on set like in the same car. And they're like, girls, you can't do that. And we're like, oh, okay. And then we'd show up next day, but would try to park like further away so no one saw us. And eventually we just gave up because we're like, we're bubbling together. It's fine. But like we loved each other so much. We had that instant connection and bond that like we just loved being around each other and like joking around. And it was truly amazing hanging out with Tantu, like offset, and just hearing the stories that she has. Like she's had to endure, I can't talk right now, so much in this industry, like just, sexism, racism, stereotypes. And she's still like this super strong, opinionated indigenous woman who's, everyone, you see her face and you know exactly who she is. So it was very much amazing to be able to be on set and just watch her work and to hear stories from other sets that she's done, and how if we ever had questions like, oh, how should we deal with this, she had advice and she was so ready to give it to us.
That's amazing. So when the film came out, there was a lot of conversation about whether or not this was Martin Scorsese's story to tell. Even though,
Mm.
with the predominant cast, there were a lot of indigenous advisors on set, bringing the perspective, rewriting the script, all kinds, adding so much flavor to this story. When I first saw it, I joked with friends of mine and I said, look, if this film had been made by another director 10, 15 years ago, the film would have started with Molly going to Washington D.C. and saying my people have been murdered, and then it would have been all about the FBI after that. You would not have had essentially the first hour and a half of the film where
Yeah.
you're getting into the perspective where you're learning about the culture and all those beautiful moments that I think make this story so much more well-rounded. After the premiere, after things have sort of calmed down and people have seen the film, where do you stand on that particular question?
I think that we need our allies. Like right now, unfortunately, native cinema isn't where it should be or where it could be. There's a stat out there that says over the last 16 years, I want to say 16 years, that the number of speaking roles on TV and film for Indigenous actors is less than 1/4%. It's literally 0.25% of all roles. Um, that had a native speaking person, and that was it, 0.25 over 16 years, and it never went over 1%. So it's insane. And I forgot the question that you asked. Oh, Marty. Yeah, allies. But like I feel like Hollywood is so behind on getting behind native stories that it's hard for us to actually be able to tell them and to prove like our stories aren't some unique little like niche thing that people don't understand. Like who doesn't understand having their family torn apart by evil people? Like who doesn't understand that? So it's for me, there's such a human, every story is just basically a human connection. And so when somebody like Marty shows interest, we're all for it because, like I said, we need our allies right now. Like, there's not what other director could have taken on the scope of this.
Right.
And so it's very much like I feel that Marty set a very high bar by having native consultants and native um, director or native people, Osage native people in each department, like making sure it's authentic and stuff like that. But as much as it's crazy, because like that's a high bar for us as natives, but literally it should be the bare minimum of anything moving forward, because why would you try to tell a native story when you don't have natives in wardrobe, when you don't have natives in set, when you don't have native, language and consultant and award, I think I already said wardrobe, but everything like that, like that should be the bare minimum. But I do think that, I love Marty. He did the best he could, but I always feel like if you're going to tell native story, you need a native in the writer's room. So, I mean, I think moving forward, that should be kind of bare minimum is you need natives from the beginning. So that way we're not doing damage control on set.
Right. And coming from things like Reservation Dogs, things like War Pony, things like Killers of the Flower Moon, it's up to Hollywood to be able to say, "Hey, let's continue the inclusivity and to expand that inclusivity beyond Asian Americans and African Americans, and just have authentic perspectives when you're telling a story, and be interested in more than one type of story."
Yeah, because it's
Because
crazy.
as
Because like with natives, they're always like, okay, oh, you're a native cop, you're native, and you want to be a cop. Okay, let's put you on a reservation in a teepee. You're a tribal cop now. And I'm like, no, we can just be cops. Like there's so many urban natives that have never lived on reservations or come from reservations, but are starting, businesses. So it's like for me, I'm like, yeah, we're, you know we don't necessarily need to have specific native stories, because if you hire me as a cop, it's they're going to be a native cop no matter what,
Right.
you know? So it's like
Right.
I don't necessarily need a feather in my hair, braids, and an eagle flying behind me, you know?
No, I mean it's so much more interesting too to hire someone into a, you know, a cop role, for example, and to have that perspective. And you know, what does that character then think about the story? Maybe you should think a little bit harder about what that character says and does and acts, because
Mhm.
they're bringing, you know, an entire culture and history behind them to this role. Like I think
Yeah.
it's just become so challenging that I think sometimes people are just like, eh, let's just cast
Yeah.
a white person, it'll be okay.
I feel like they get, I think they're intimidated to tell like native stories from a native perspective. Cause I mean, like I said, it should be a native person telling it. But if you're writing just a character that you can openly cast as any, like there shouldn't have to be a change of script. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like it's
Yeah.
just like you can hire a native and you don't have to change a single word unless I'm talking about how I'm black. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
But you know, you shouldn't be hiring someone who, you know, hire someone appropriate for that role.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your performance. So you play Anna Brown, the sister of Lily Gladstone's Molly Burkhart, who unfortunately passes in the film. It's the, you know, spoiler alert. It's one of the catalysts of the film. You know, obviously you talked about the alcoholism, the sort of drowning her sorrows in what's happening to the Osage community within that alcoholism. What else sort of went into that? Is that, you know, in terms of defining how you were going to play her?
Honestly, I think it was as simple as the fact that she loved her family so incredibly much that losing them, it affected her so incredibly deeply that it manifested in ways that, like alcoholism and hanging out with the wrong people. I feel like it's honestly that simple for me. It's just the fact that she loved her family so much and she loved her people and her culture so much that losing that and losing, you know, herself, like wanting to know what the future is, because she was more modern than the other girls, and were more, she was more adventurous than the other girls. So I think just having that and knowing that she is this incredible force of life. Like I know at the end she's murdered. So for me, I had to infuse as much like passion and energy and just fun and laughter and love and feistiness in, you know, in her, so that way when she's gone her presence is missed, like you feel the missing, I guess, excitement of her. So, and like honestly, just the fact that it was filmed on the Osage reservation, the Osage land, was so incredibly important, because you go there and, you know, when you're just visiting, you're like, oh, this is a beautiful place. But then once you start talking to the Osage people, because they were so incredibly willing to share their story and talk about like how the reign of terror affected their family, that like you're driving around and they're like, oh, that's where my grandmother was ran off the road, or, you know, my grandfather was poisoned over there, or, you know, and it's one of those things where you see, truly see how the trickle down effect, I guess, how it's still affecting the Osage and how it has trickled down and how it's molded their culture. And so, because like, you know, I've been to multiple reservations, I've been around a lot of like native people, and the Osage, they do have this uniqueness about them that you can definitely, like, I think because, you know, us as actors dove so deeply into the customs and the culture and stuff like that, like it's more noticeable for us to see the effect. And I mean, one of the things that really broke my heart is actually about a month or so ago, a woman reached out to me who had taken her 15-year-old daughter to the movie theater. And it was when Henry Rowan was shot. She leans over to her mom and says, is that my great grandpa? And she's like, yes, it is. So it's like they're literally watching their relatives being murdered on screen. And like they know why there's like a missing part of them and their culture. So it is such a important thing to me that people understand that although it is entertainment, it's really, really not. Yeah.
And it's, you know, the Osage must continue to struggle with this generational trauma. I mean, and it's not that far removed. I mean, your grandparents, it's like two generations. It's still right there. It's prevalent. and haunting them, I would imagine, every day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I want to talk about your death scene. So,
Mhm.
ostensibly, it happens very quick.
Mhm.
Anna's sitting on the rock. She's shot from behind. But I wondered, as I thought about it and as I rewatched it, I wondered, and maybe this is me reading too much into it, I almost wondered at that point, did you play it that she was resigned to what was happening, that this was that the moment that she thought was coming, it was finally there, and she, I mean, obviously she doesn't want to die, but it's
Mhm.
almost like there's just an inevitability. I can't talk either. An inevitability to it, and it's just all of that is just conveyed in a very quick amount of time. But talk to me about filming that scene, kind of what was going through your head.
Yeah, it's interesting because that morning they were filming the scene where they pulled the body out and they're basically sawing it. And so all morning that had happened. And when I showed up on set, I was just like kind of, all happy, smiling, happy to see everyone like, hi, hi. And then I quickly realized like the vibe was so ominous, like literally people were looking at me like they saw a ghost. Like I had people come up and touch me and then just walk away. Like that's how insanely poignant that filming of that was. And so, I walk on set and you can like they have my body there and it was very weird and creepy to see. But I knew that, you know, Anna, as drunk as she was and as much as she, I guess Byron actually told people that she was saying, "You're gonna kill me. I know you're gonna kill me," kind of thing. But to me, it's like she was fighting to the end. Like even though it's like she was so drunk that she didn't know when it was happening, but she could tell something was wrong,
Right.
and like they were basically dragging her down there. So it's, I don't know if it was like a resignation to it or just she knew it was going to happen, but I think it's something that every Osage at the time was worried about was the fact that, one day they'll just be there and then the next second they're gone. So for me, it was very much like I wasn't expecting my death, but I was gonna like fight it, still and argue with him, be ornery about it. And then when it happens, like, because I wanted her fighting till the end, even though she's
Sure.
drunk and can barely stand up, she's still kind of like trying to push him away and stuff like that. And so I think having her fighting for that and then having her shot and just laying there, like Marty did such a good job with all of the murders, is that he would show how sudden it was and then how discarded they were. How, like, they didn't show any kind of remorse, how they didn't show any kind of, like, panic. They're just like, "Hmm," and then walk away. And so I think he did a really good job of that because that's how they were treated then. They were very much, in the movie, it says you're more likely to go to jail for kicking a dog than murdering an Indian, which is absolutely insane to me, but that's how they were treated.
Yeah, and he films those sequences, those death sequences, with the probably with the exception of the explosion of the house, but it's not done with the adoration of gore the way that something like Goodfellas and Casino before it would have had. It's just it's shocking, and it's in the way that it's done so quickly. And you're right. I mean, they just kind of walk away. There's no remorse. There's no, it's almost like, well, I've damaged property or something like that. I mean, it's just that callous.
Yeah, and I mean, he always shot it kind of more in a wide shot, so where you kind
Right.
of see everything. He doesn't change angles and do all this stuff and get close-ups, and it's very much like you're just watching it happen, and you're like, "What do I do now?" You're just staring at this dead person, like, it's very discombobulating, and I definitely in the very opening when De Niro's like, the Osage are the most beautiful people on God's earth. And then the next scene is literally him being poisoned and like gagging. It's like, for me, that is so hard of a shift, and Marty did so good with that because even though it's so incredibly hard to watch, it's like you just can't look away.
Right. Well, I also can't look away from your beautiful performance. I think you've done a tremendous job, and I love how you describe. You know, you wanted Anna to pop. You wanted just to stand out and miss her when she's gone. Audience is definitely, and I miss those intimate moments with you and the sisters sitting on the blanket in the park and just just being people. Those are just such beautiful moments too. I have to close with a question. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, showed me an Instagram video that you filmed
Mm.
when the Los Angeles premiere was at I believe it was the Hollywood, no, the Chinese theater. Was it the Chinese theater?
Yeah, it was
And
like, yeah.
I think so. Anyway, it was in Hollywood, and
Mm.
it was during the strike, so obviously actors could not attend in support of the film.
Yeah.
And you filmed yourself talking about your reaction to not being able to be at that premiere.
Mm.
Can you talk about that moment? What was going through your head?
Yeah, it was very, I think I was just so disappointed because this is, my first big film, and this is such an important story to me, and Anna's so incredibly important to me that I want to share this. And the fact that we couldn't at the time was really upsetting. So for me, I was like, well, I want to at least go down and see what it would have looked like. But which was a bad idea because as soon as I got there, I was just like, "Ooh," I started crying. But it was just, I think it's just so emotional because I'm so incredibly, like, passionate about this project. I'm so incredibly passionate about the story and about Anna, and knowing that, this needs to be told, that when we're silenced from it, and I mean, completely good reason why, with these strike and everything, it's just, I'm like full support of the strike, but I can still be disappointed that I miss things.
Sure, you're
And so it
human.
was just, yeah, yeah. So I think it was really hard for me at the time. And I mean, it still makes me sad thinking about it, that there's, we missed the New York premiere, we missed the London premiere, we missed Mexico City, we missed LA. Like we missed so many things, that this is our first big film that, I'm sure we'll experience it all again, but it's like, are we going to experience it on a Martin Scorsese film? So I think it's definitely heartbreaking not to be able to, share our story with the world. And I knew the strike would end eventually, but just during that, I just wanted to be completely honest that, like, I support my union, but we are human, and we are, I don't know if suffering is a right word, but we are very much, turmoil, suffering. I don't know. I'm being dramatic because I'm an actor, but we're very much emotional about these things.
Right. Well, you will get another chance. I mean, obviously, I understand, the disappointment that, not being able to go to all these premieres for your very first major film, but you will get other chances, and I can't wait to see what you do. And plus, you've got all the fantastic things are going to happen this season as you and Killer of the Flower Moon head into the Oscar race, which will undoubtedly see more of you.
Yeah,
So,
I was like, we were all like, me and the sisters were on a group chat. We're like, please end before the effing Oscars. Like,
yeah, exactly.
we were so like, just please, like, we want to go. Because I mean, honestly, like, who knows if we'll ever experience this again? It could just be gone like that. I mean, we hope so, like, we get to experience again, but there's no guarantees.
Well, you've got the Golden Globes, you've got the SAG Awards, you've got the Oscars. All those things are. I'm very confident that Killers of the Flower Moon is going to do very well
Yeah, I'm just excited for the fashion too.
there. Amazing. Well, Cara, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for this conversation. This was really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.